All right, we're going to look at Warrior One, Virabhadrasana. This pose for most people is very challenging because most people have tight psoas, hip flexor muscles, and this pose is designed to stretch that muscle. The trick, though, and the challenge and difficulty is the back foot being flat makes it a little bit more challenging to square the hips. Now, let's understand the reason we want the hips squared to the front of the mat is to stretch the psoas. The psoas is being stretched because one leg is in extension. If I open my hip, I lose the stretch of the hip flexor group. If I square my hips, I now get that stretch. A easier, more accessible way to stretch that would be a crescent lunge or a low lunge. However, Warrior One, one of the foundational poses of the practice, we're going to look at how to get into it. Warrior One stance, despite what other styles of yoga might say, in my opinion, based on what I've seen with thousands of students over the years, is that most people need a shorter and wider stance to get the hips squared to the front of the mat with the back foot flat. Therefore, I throw out that heel to heel alignment that I've heard in Warrior One. I'm adamantly against that for 99% of the population of people who are doing yoga. So that means from our down dog, typically where we come from, to get into it, we're going to work on the step into it in the stance and what might work best for you. Little variation for every body, but we'll give some options and some of the cues I like to give to help people find this posture more comfortably. Posture that I hated for the longest time. Now I love it, thoroughly enjoy it, and I'm helping other people feel more comfortable with it too. So from a down dog position, we need to make sure, like we have before, that we are in the proper down dog distance. So that would be 2 fist distance of the hips, of the feet, width of the hips. She's going to come forward into a plank just to make sure it has the right length. Good, so we have shoulders over the wrist. Now when she goes to down dog, we're in a better place to proceed from here. Now, most people will say step the foot up. That doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help anything. Where are we stepping to? If she steps her foot, go ahead and step your foot right to the middle of your hands, and then spin your back foot flat, and now rise up for Warrior One. The chances of her hips being squared to the front are 0 to none, okay? Because she has a narrow stance and very long for her. You can see this left hip is quite farther back than the right. Therefore, she's not going to get what she really wants out of this, which is a stretch for the hip flexor. So she's going to return back to downward facing dog. So then this would imply what? I'm going to want to have a wider stance. To have a wider stance, I need to step to a different place. The cues that I like to give, or the different indicators or places of stepping to, would be either to the thumb, to the wrist, or to the hand. So I'm going to have Caitlin step her right foot, right toes to her right wrist. Now what this is doing is creating a much shorter stance from front to back and a wider stance from left to right. Now with this back foot, let's just play with it right now. All I'm going to have her do is drive her heel back. This is key because anytime we step forward, momentum brings us forward. If she does that, and I'll show from a side view here in a moment, and then she spins her foot flat, her toes are going to be pointed back or to the side, which isn't going to work to keep the hips squared. So as she steps toward toes to wrist, she's going to press her heel back, then spin the foot flat at an angle. From there, as she rises up, she's a little bit more squared to the front. Okay, now this is going to be a little bit different for everyone. She might want to try a different hand placement. So as she brings her hands back to the mat, returns to downward facing dog, I'm going to have Caitlin try it on the left side. Now this option would be to replace her hand with her foot or to step to the thumb. So left foot's going to come forward, stepping to the hand. She can even lift her hand up a little bit. Now she drives her heel back and spins it flat, and as she comes up, what we're going to see very clearly, way too long of a stance. So that doesn't work for Caitlin's body. She's going to return to the mat for downward facing dog. And now we know for her, toes to wrist is probably the best option. Left toes step to left wrist. Right heel drives back, spins flat. Oh, how does that feel, Caitlin? Much more stable. You can just see it in her stance. You can see her hips are almost completely squared. Now, once we are in this nice warrior position like we have here with Caitlin, what she's going to focus on is bringing her bottom ribs in, her pubic bone pulls up, navel point draws back toward the spine. Okay. Then she's feeling this inward rotation of the back thigh, that inward rotation of the back thigh as she anchors through the outer edge of her back foot. Bent at 90 degrees roughly at this front leg. I like knee over ankle, and then again keeping everything in tight. The tighter you are, you're in your core here, the more length and stretch you're going to get here. As her arms are over her head, she has her biceps next to her ears, arm bones rotated externally. And if you could see on her back, her shoulder blades are spread instead of drawing back toward one another. The hands will indicate that the arm bones are rotated externally because they'll either face each other or face toward the back of the wall. Awesome. Thanks, Caitlin. Let's show it now from a side view. So we're going to turn the mat so you can see what's happening with that back foot. All right, so now if Caitlin goes to her downward facing dog, from her plank, she finds the correct distance, presses back to downward dog. Great. Now we're going to have her step her right. Actually, we'll have her left foot step forward on this one. And I want you to watch. She's going to drive her heel back and then spin it flat. And from here, her heel is about middle of her hands, and this heel's off to the side. So we've got a little bit of space to work with, so we're not walking a tightrope. Now she's focused on. And what tends to happen for a lot of people is when this back foot spins flat, the hip kind of kicks out to the side. We see that a lot. Now, Caitlin obviously didn't do that, but she's going to drag her left hip back, so her left sit bone is in line with her left heel. This foot stays anchored. Now she can rise up and come into a really beautiful warrior one. Okay, then she starts to tune into all the other elements. Bottom ribs in, hip points lift. This back leg is spiraling inward, rotation. Glute is engaged, front knee is bent. Beautiful. There it is, warrior one. You're gonna have to play with it. You can come on down. Finding the correct foot placement. Do you want to step to your thumb? Do you want to step to your hand? Do you want to step to your wrist? I just definitely recommend a wider and shorter stance for most people who are going to be doing this posture. The other thing about warrior one, it doesn't transition very well to warrior two, despite other styles of yoga doing it. The foot placement's different. Warrior two, we are heel to heel, roughly, and way longer. Therefore, you have to make little adjustments at your feet to do that.